My name's Linda Fox. I'm senior reporter with PhocusWire. I'm delighted to welcome Duncan Robertson. He's UK and Ireland General Manager for Dott. Welcome, Duncan.
Thanks very much. It's lovely to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Just thinking about the amount of investment that's going generally into e-scooters and e-bikes, why do you think the sector is attracting so much investment?
It's a very good question. Let me just start by explaining who Dott are quickly, in case
sure.
you're not aware. We're a micromobility, which is the new word for scooters and e-bikes and various other modes of transport. We operate predominantly in Europe and been in operation for the last 4 years, and very much looking forward to the future. So, why are people investing in e-scooters and e-bikes and micromobility? I think what it boils down to is that cities are shifting, people are shifting. There's now much more focus on what people do in cities, not what cars can do for people in cities. So, there's this kind of general trend towards just freeing up space for smaller light vehicles like bikes and e-scooters. So I think that people are seeing that this is a trend. Cities are kind of closing their city centres. To traffic, and this is only going to increase over time. So yeah, I think that the foresight that people are having is that there is going to be a shift away from the car, and people are just more interested in different opportunities and different options to getting around town. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of foresight into what's happening in city centres in particular.
So again, sort of generally, is that investment kind of in terms of the size of it, the sort of sums that are going in, is it needed? What do those sort of sums actually go towards when you think about micromobility? Yeah,
it's a great question. So predominantly what the investment that certainly Dott get, what we use our investment for is primarily capital funding, making sure that we've got our vehicles ready to go into cities. All of our cities need to be able to be profitable, and they need to be able to work. They need to be able to be financially sustainable. So yeah, the investment that's coming in is making sure that we can get to new cities where appropriate. We can launch and we can operate vehicles in cities that need and want it, but we just need to make sure that our day-to-day operations are all working and profitable, which is critical.
Now, there are quite a few of you out there now. Certainly when I go around my neighbourhood in London, there are 3 or 4 different brands. So what would you say makes, for example, Dott stand out from the others?
Yeah, so I think that the key differentiator that I would consider from a Dott perspective is that our main focus is on operations. It's on making sure that our vehicles are in the places that they need to be when people need them. They're fully charged, ready to go. So we focus really highly on our availability of our vehicles, making sure, as I say, that they're charged up, ready to go. And making sure that we use various AI to make sure that the vehicles are in the right places. So if you're in London, we want to make sure that in the morning Waterloo has scooters and bikes, so that people coming into that main rail hub have got somewhere to complete their journey. I was just listening to the previous talk, and there's real interesting integrations with people like the train line, so that you can finish that journey.
Yeah.
And then making sure that when you want to go back, the vehicles are ready and available for you as well. So I think that's a key one. The second one is around our product. So we're really heavily product focused. We make sure that the vehicles are really well maintained. So we have all in-house operations. We want to keep that lifespan of that vehicle as long as possible, for environmental reasons, but just for practical reasons as well. So that's another key element for us. I think one important distinction that where we feel we are in the industry right now as Dott is that for a long time, companies like Dott would describe themselves as tech companies. And I think that, what we've done is slightly shifted that and said, we use technology, but we're an operator. We're practical. We're on the ground. We're making sure that, our vehicles are moving around. People are using them every day. They need to be safe. They need to be where they need to be. So we really focus on the kind of the operational side of things, as opposed to just kind of throwing technology at the problem.
I think maybe some of those companies calling themselves tech companies, it was a way to get around some of the regulatory issues at the time, but who knows? So what would you say are kind of the current challenges for e-scooters and e-bikes? I recall watching a clip of you with sort of July last year, and it was about, coming to market, but making sure that you had taken into account Transport for London is the one that springs to mind, but and wider government as you launched.
Yeah, so for those that are listening from the UK and Ireland, we're a little bit behind the rest of the world here, where we don't have scooters in particular are not legal at the moment.
No.
Now, that extends to private scooters, and before kind of mid 2020, it also extended to shared use scooters. And as part of the DFT and various cities around the country, their goal of getting more people, getting a non-car based recovery out of the back of travel restrictions from COVID, it was thought that introducing scooter schemes would be a good idea, and I think it is. But what that has meant is that there's a little bit of kind of secondary legislation that was tweaked to allow for shared schemes to be used. And that means that we need to go to local authorities. We have a big operation in London, so we work very closely with TfL. We were procured by TfL, so we are accountable to them on a contractual basis. And indirectly, we're also accountable to all of the local authorities in London. So it's very, very tightly controlled. It's very, very highly regulated, which is in many ways a very positive thing. But yeah, that is basically how we've kind of got to the position we're in. Currently, and only in the last few weeks, government has announced that legalizing scooters more generally, including private scooters in the UK, is going to go through the legislative process as part of the transport bill. Mm-hmm. It has to go through. Once it goes through that, then there will be various regulations added on top of it, and then off the back of that, we should be in a place where scooters are fully legalized. So it's a long process, but anything that requires primary legislation is a long process. As I'd say that we've been fairly fortunate as shared companies to be able to operate in cities in the meantime, and I think we're really proving the case that scooters, particularly shared scooters, can be safe, can be reliable, and can be useful.
So apart from the kind of the regulatory side, which sounds as if it's kind of going through the processes, but what other kind of challenges are there, would you say?
So as I mentioned, I think one of the key challenges for us is rather boring, and I always kind of picture it in this boring way, but it is making sure it's that operational focus. It's making sure that you can do the right things and making sure those vehicles are in the right places. The second side of this is that the way that cities want to go, and I happen to agree, is that what we want to avoid is a kind of conflict between non-scooter users and everyone else. The streets should be for everyone, and that's something that we truly believe. And the key element to kind of controlling that is by introducing dedicated parking bays. So that's something that we do in London. We have really tightly controlled parking. You can only end your scooter trip when you're in a parking bay. But in order for us to be able to have a really effective service for all those use cases that people want to use scooters for and e-bikes, we need to make sure we have a really dense and good parking network. So that is a really critical challenge to how we can both satisfy the non-users and also allow the people that do want to use the services to do the trips that they want to do.
So, I mean, you mentioned kind of just with the sort of existing trials that are going on that, it's popular and it's safe. And so who is actually your kind of demographic?
So we see an awful lot of usage from commuters. In fact, we see traditional in this industry as a morning and evening peak. And we are absolutely seeing that. So we're getting a lot of usage from commuters. We particularly focus on making sure that we're present at rail hubs, present, near tube stations, near buses, so that people can do those onward journeys. But we're also focusing in more kind of residential regional areas of kind of more outer London. We're making sure that we can provide that last mile as well. So we're making that link between people's homes and then to the transport hub and then onwards into central London. So commuters is a key element. We're also seeing a high number of tourists and kind of casual usage, particularly European tourists who are coming to London, which is a very high number, who will be familiar with Dott and have accounts set up in various other countries that we operate in. So yeah, there's a great deal of usage from those kind of groups as well. The focus for us at Dott is to try and make sure that we're as close as possible, pricing wise, to public transport. We really want to get down to that point so that we can provide a public transport and be considered as a public transport. So yeah, that's kind of where we're looking for scooters. It's typically slightly younger audience. For electric bikes, slightly older, and typically going further as well on the e-bike.
And just because you mentioned kind of some tourists as well, is there the opportunity to kind of extend the usage into, I don't know, tours and activities in the same way as I suppose segways were used for kind of tours of cities?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a partnership with a company in London called Scootors, who we every time they run a session, we provide them with a number of scooters. They typically do about 10 to 15 people, do a quick safety briefing on how to ride a scooter once around the block, and then they do a tour. And they've got a City of London tour, a Westminster tour. So they do these tours, and we're more than happy supporting them. They've been really, really, really great, and the tours are fantastic. So it's absolutely a way to explore a city, and this partnership has proven that, and they're it's working very well.
And do you see other kind of use cases for scooters and e-bikes going forward in terms of how other partnerships might kind of blossom?
Yeah, well, I think again, leaning back on the conversation that was previously had with the person from Trainline. I think that one of the things that we're really keen to do is to kind of open up our ability to integrate with other services. So we work with Citymapper and Google, and hopefully at some stage we work with Trainline as well. And we have partnerships with some train operators coming down the line as well. So being able to really mass is talked about a lot for many years. But I do feel like we're slowly but surely inching towards somewhere. Like, we've got the data, we really want to share it, and we just need to get those right contacts in now. And we need to start seeing people, understanding that one package can buy them, the whole suite of product of transport options. Because people really are thinking and starting to think about their entire end-to-end journey, which should and could include scooters and bikes.
So I just wanted to just sort of touch on the sustainability angle here, because I just saw that your founder, he invested in a scheme where you recycle bikes, and then you recycle electric bikes, from what I understand, and then you can buy them. So do e-bikes and e-scooters have a shelf life? Because the sustainability angle is often kind of played up, but if at the end of the day they expire.
I mean, everything expires, unfortunately, as much as we would like it not to. But to that end, we do try and extend that life as long as humanly possible. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we have all our operations in-house, so we spend a lot of time on maintenance. We do proactive maintenance, we do reactive maintenance. We regularly checking the vehicles to make sure that there's nothing wrong with them, and if there is, we take them in, we get them serviced, we do QC checks, make sure that they can go back on the street and they're working. Typically we would expect a shelf life of our vehicles to be at the very least 5 years. That's the kind of timeline that we're working on, potentially even longer. So some of our early vehicles, which are a long way from where we are now, even those vehicles are still, they're going into their kind of fourth summer, which is quite incredible. So yeah, from a sustainability perspective, like, the key thing that we can do is extend. One of the key things that we can do is extend the lifespan of our vehicles. I think the industry certainly in its early days, was open to a great deal of accurate criticism that vehicles weren't. They were. I think there were stories of them lasting 3 months or something, and we are a long way away from that now. As I say, 5 years for scooters and bikes. These vehicles are tough. They're not. They're built for sharing. They're built for being outside in the cold and the rain and the snow and all that kind of stuff. They're built to be kind of used all the time. So the quality of the hardware is just incredibly robust nowadays compared to what was available to begin with. The other thing that is worth mentioning when it comes to sustainability and kind of the environmental credentials of our industry is, our operation in London is entirely operated via either a cargo bike or electric van. So completely electrified when it comes to our operation. I remember when there was fuel shortages a few months ago. People were saying, "Oh, is this impacting you?" And I kind of took me by surprise. Like, no, it's not. We're absolutely fine because we're not using ICE engines. So yeah, it's very different in that respect. And you mentioned recycling. Any vehicle that we do get into the warehouse that is broken beyond repair or anything like that, or has been damaged in some way or vandalized, we take that vehicle and we strip it down. We reuse all of the pieces. And anything that we can't reuse on other vehicles, we recycle as well. So, I think that the industry was open legitimately to criticism in the past, but I think certainly from our perspective, we think that we're really shifting things and we're really kind of moving the needle. One of the key elements for us as well is manufacturing locally as well. So to really cut down on any kind of transport miles of vehicles.
Oh, good to hear. Okay, Duncan, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And stay tuned, everyone. We've got Turo peer-to-peer car rental marketplace coming up next. Thanks again, Duncan.